Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one and only Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
I am doing good, but you look dapper today.
Oh, thank you very much.
You got the pink shirt going, the brown new belt.
I'm doing the best I can.
You are. I'm the schlep here.
No way.
I wear the same thing almost every day.
No, you look fantastic. I am just, I got to step up my game.
Well, summer is coming. We're still in spring. Another week or so to go till summer. But you've got the summer going on with your clothes there.
I always prefer summer than spring and winter. I can't stand winter. Once summer comes out, boom, I'm outside in the sun.
You look like you're ready for Florida. You are a Florida kind of guy.
Well, as we're doing this, I'll be on my way to Florida, actually. We're preempting our show here for our listeners, but I'll be driving to Florida as you're listening to this podcast.
Dapper Chris with his arm over the steering wheel, the kids on their iPads in the back of the whatever it is you're driving, van, SUV.
Anything to hold six people in luggage.
Yep. Back in my day, we had the seat that faced backwards.
Yeah.
So we had two of our kids in the back, and no one wanted to sit in that third seat.
Oh, really? No one wanted to sit facing backwards?
The first day I got the car, they did. After one trip, they said, I'm not going
Yeah, I'm done with this. Yeah, I'm over this. Hey, I'm so glad that our listeners have tuned in. Thank you for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, just a fresh reminder, you can contact us at 424-444-1948. Leave us a text. Shoot us a text. Steve, actually, we got a great text.
One of our 7 actually contacted us.
I know. We have a great listener here from the area code 864, which is in South Carolina. He's a Messianic Jewish believer. He listens to the podcast. He says he's a little behind, but he likes the Revelation podcast we have going on right now. And he listens on iHeartRadio app. And so he says he's always a little bit behind, but hey, no problem.
iHeartRadio? Somebody's listening to us on iHeartRadio.
On the app. I guess we have our podcast on that app.
Unbelievable.
Steve, I'm glad that you're impressed.
I'm very impressed.
I live to impress you, and that I've done it.
It's not a high standard.
Well, let's hey, you know what? The podcast is over. No, I'm joking. But we have a great show for you. We are going to be talking about the Jewish afterlife coming up in a moment. We've got some great news. We're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 20 today. Oh, we've got some interesting music coming up.
We've discovered some things. You know, I was thinking about Revelation chapter 20, and I wanted to add something that's a little bit different. So I was looking up music that kind of, from the time of creation, and it fell, man sinned, and things are tough. So because of my age, I thought, happy days are here again. So I looked it up, asked you about it. Of course, you never heard of the song.
Heard that song, no.
And so I was looking on YouTube for different renditions, and I said, nah, this really isn't good. Although those of you old enough to remember Happy Days Are Here Again, it actually was written in 1929 when the Depression came along. So they're trying to find some upbeat kind of way. But anyway, I checked out some other things and found something very interesting we'll be hearing. And
it's totally different from Happy Days Are Here.
It's totally different from Happy Days Are Here Again.
Steve, with our phone number, 424-444-1948, people can contact us. But you were wondering, actually, if our audience might be interested in something.
Well, Chris, you and I have talked, mostly me. I want to get us mugs. I want to get us coffee mugs, the Jew and Gentile coffee mug. Those of you who are able to watch us on YouTube, behind me and directly in front of Chris is a picture of the Jew and Gentile, what we use as a promo for all 7 of you who are listening. And we've talked about, wouldn't it be cool to get a mug? And one of our 7 listeners, Patty, I talked to her about it, and she said, I would buy one, and I'd buy one for each of my friends.
Oh,
now, we're not looking to make money, but we don't want to spend the money on the mugs and be stuck with whatever we order.
Well, and
no
also
one's
ordering
interested.
7 mugs will be very expensive.
That's right. So what we decided, since we got our 424-444-1948 text vehicle to be able to communicate with us, We want to throw it out there. If you would be interested in the idea, that's a good idea to have a Jew and the Gentile podcast mug. If you're interested, and then would you buy one?
Yeah, and it would also be a component to help support the Jew and Gentile podcast as well, and FOI Equip, and all that we're doing in FOI Equip. So we've had this campaign going on for a long time between me and Steve. Steve wants it. He goes, I want a mug on a mug. That's what he says.
That's what I call it, a mug on a mug.
Steve wants a mug on a mug. So if you want a mug on a mug, let us know you're interested. 424-444-1948. And we'll get to work on it. We're doing our best. But we'll see what we can do to make that possible. But text us. Let us know. Again, 424-444-1948. Steve, Jewish afterlife. It's been astonishing to hear various perspectives from one New Testament scholar, Amy Jill Levine, whose mother passed away. And in that moment, she's a very liberal New Testament scholar, probably doesn't believe a lot of anything about the New Testament.
Not according to her husband. When we read that little piece, he said, you never talked about an afterlife. And she said, for my mother, I have.
Exactly, because she wants the hope of seeing her mother again. So like that, she switched on a dime. And then we heard about reincarnation.
Yes.
We've just last week we heard about resurrection, which is the biblical view of the afterlife.
Exactly. This comes from Moment Magazine, and the title is "There Life After Death: Jewish Thinking on the Afterlife." And up above it says, "Better health for a better world." There you go. Well, here is Joshua Cohn, who's the author of Heaven of Others and Witz, W-I-T-Z. And here's what he says. I think everybody thinks about it, that is, the afterlife. The afterlife is the principal preoccupation of anyone who's going to die, regardless of religion. Judaism has never decided on a formal approach to the afterlife. It's never had a formal approach to eschatology either. What's going to happen at the end of the world? We're left with a typically practical or provisional interest in the world as it is, a regulation of the mundane, the here and now, rather than a pondering of the celestial. I've always felt the afterlife exists in relation to life, in the same way literature exists in relation to life. It's an imaginary sphere in which one can play out one's fears, neuroses, desires, and pains, but it is still a terrain strictly for the living. Only the living can play or imagine or read. Once a man dies, his afterlife ceases to exist. Jews, if not Judaism, regard death as a great injustice. Everything I've read tells me that Judaism is loath to encourage a positive view of the afterlife because it might encourage a more positive attitude toward death. Anything that would see death as a salvation risks encouraging the believer to shirk his job on earth or opt for thoughtless martyrdom. The classic refusal of salvation is the mourner's Kaddish, which says nothing about death or about life after death. I've always read the mourner's Kaddish as a unique provocation to God. Quote, magnified and sanctified is God, who brought us all here to the graveside to suffer, and yet who still hasn't offered any reward. It verges on gallows humor. I've never subscribed to the myth that the Kaddish can be used to spring one's parents from purgatory. It's merely a call to duty. I remember as a kid thinking, yes, that's a very effective way of getting me to shul.
That's interesting.
To synagogue.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, and it sounds like who is that again? What was that person's
His name is Joshua Cohn, author of Heaven of Others.
You know, what's interesting about that is he's saying that there is no doctrinal perspective on the afterlife in Judaism, which is patently false.
Yeah, it's just not true.
No, because Maimonides, the very famous Rambam, the 12th century Sephardic Jewish rabbi who is praised among all Jewish people, you'll find his photo and his painting in most synagogues. He wrote out the 13 principles, which is essentially the doctrinal statement of Judaism. And the last two principles have to do with the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of and the resurrection of the body, which is the afterlife. And so there's always been a concept of the afterlife. Biblically, there's been a concept of the afterlife in the Old Testament, and then that's what Maimonides was doing, was just building on that. So
100%. You go to Israel, you realize that there are actually some people buried at the Mount of Olives standing up.
are there really?
Yep.
They're standing up.
Because when the resurrection, not all of them, but some
Like
of them.
standing up underground, or they're in a...
underground, so that when the resurrection comes, boom, they're first up.
I like it, like an elevator. Boom.
Hey, the more time you spend with the Lord, the better it is. So, boom, they're up.
Was that in their will? Hey, don't bury me laying down. I want to be buried. I want to be ready to go.
The point is, he said,
Got Air Jordans on.
eschatology is a subject that a number of Jewish people hold. Remember, we said way at the beginning of this podcast, you get two of us together, you get three opinions. And then we agreed, hey, you get two Christians together, you could get more than three opinions.
That's not just a Jewish thing.
Yeah, it's not a Jewish thing. But definitely the idea of life after death, the book of Daniel talks about it. There's hope in the Psalms.
Ezekiel talks about a resurrection, even of Israel, that picture of Israel being resurrected.
Exactly. So, again, it's interesting that, look, Jewish people do celebrate life. There's no question about that. I often tell when I'm at a church and I talk about sometimes the Jewish view of evangelicals. Oh, you people talk about his death and dying and
The afterlife.
The afterlife. What about living? And that's where you get l'chaim, life. And so I say, to believe, especially as a Jewish person, to believe that Jesus is in fact the Messiah and the Savior brings two different or opposing views and puts it marvelously together. So yes, as a Jewish person, we celebrate life. You want to live life and embrace it. It's not a downer. I've met some believers who everything is bad. The world is ending. There's nothing good. Well, there's lots of good things. You have family. You celebrate things. There is joy, but there's also problems. And so those who believe that Jesus is the Savior, we can live on the earth and embrace the grace that he's given to each one of us, and then look forward to a future with him forever. What a blessing.
100%. It's just interesting to me to hear that individual say, it's what you want it to be.
That's probably the way he said it. That's typical. Forget about it.
That's right. But it is interesting that he would claim that there is no biblical basis or a doctrine to Judaism. But you know what? That comes as a result of, one day we'll have to have a conversation with our audience about the differences in Judaism when it comes to the spheres of, or the different worldviews of Judaism, from conservatism, Orthodox, to the more Reformed and Reconstructionist. So a Reformed Jewish person definitely, or even Reconstructionist, would have a mindset that maybe there's an afterlife, maybe there isn't. But the Bible says nothing about that.
Well, Chris, there's three words here that epitomize Western culture, as Joshua Cohen wrote this. I've always felt. There it is. He says, I've always felt the afterlife exists in relationship to life. Okay, you could feel that way all you want.
Yeah.
But if you did research, you'd realize that there are views of, yes, there is eschatology, Jewish eschatology. Yes, there is an afterlife according to the Bible and rabbinic theology. So you could reject that. We talk about that all the time. God has told us what to. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people were supposed to be obedient. Yes, we will do this. And how long did it take? Well, we didn't really mean it. We're not going to do it.
40 days Moses was up on Mount Sinai.
You know what? We're 40 set free days. Here. We got garlic. We got leeks. It's better to go back to Egypt.
I just always think it's funny. Moses goes, I'll be back soon. Just stay put. I'm going to go up to Mount Sinai, and then I'll come back down. I'm going to represent you. And 40 days, the guy comes down. The guy, they broke the law. The law didn't even come down yet.
They said,
they broke the law.
He's not coming back. let's build something. We got to worship something.
It's so us.
It's so sinful, man. That's what we are.
It's sinful, man. It's exactly because we do. 40 days. Is God even listening to me?
Yeah.
You know?
It's going to be feel like 40 days when you take your family down driving to Florida.
Well, we leave at 4:30 in the morning.
You're already in trouble.
Well, I'm hoping they get up, get in the car, get excited, and then fall back asleep again. And that'll give us a couple hours of some quiet.
There you go.
You used to do that. You had 4 kids.
I used to get up at 3. We kept them in their jammies. We just, especially when they were super little, the 2 older ones got in the car on their own, and I remember just pulling our twins out of the crib and walking him or her, depending on which one I had, dropping them in the car seat and not skip a beat. They were sleeping and stayed asleep.
100%. That's what I want. But my twins are getting kind of old now, so they're not really there. But hopefully they fall asleep. Steve, I do want to remind our listeners that the Jew and Gentile podcast is sponsored by FOI Equip, and we've got
a class. We are having a great class that's coming up.
That's right. We've got Tim Harrison, who's going to be teaching on church history. And this is how this came about. We do weekly chapels here at Friends of Israel, and we have people do from all around the world with Friends of Israel do a devotional or share about what's going on in their ministry.
We
pray together during the chapel. And so during one of the chapels a few weeks ago, our very own Tim Harrison here at the Friends of Israel, he did one on church history, and he highlighted one of the church fathers. And he did a fantastic job of teaching about church history in a really applicable way. And so that's why Steve and I, we got out of chapel. We said, we got to have Tim on for FOI Equip.
We got to make a course. And he is so laid back, so easy. Hey, Tim, do you think you could do that on a course that we have, Equip? He said, oh, yeah, sure. When do you want it?
100%.
So we said in the summer, and so I keep talking to him. Are you ready? He said, I'm almost there.
Steve, I have to tell you, every single time I plan out a year with our committee, our FOI Equip committee, and I plan out our classes for the year, I always say, guys, we're going to take off in July. We're not going to do anything. And then within a few months, boom, July gets filled. It's a 3-week course. It starts July 6th. If you want to register for Tim Harrison's church history class to learn about some important figures in church history, remember, the church didn't just appear after the Reformation. The church didn't just appear in the last 100 years. The church that you go to today stands on millennia of church history, and God has preserved the gospel of the church, to continue to flourish, to continue to bring people to faith in him for thousands of years. And so it's important to understand where our history comes from. And that's what Tim will be talking about.
Tim Harrison is a Egyptologist. It's a hobby of his, but he goes to the museum down in Philadephia. He could read the hieroglyphics.
Yeah, I know.
He has taken, without having the proper scholarly credentials, he has taken PhDs to the museum and read the stuff, the hieroglyphics there, given them interesting information about Egypt and all that. And he just said, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. It's just a little hobby of mine that I dabble in.
Yep. He also does trains. He does model trains as a hobby, and church history as a hobby. So there you go.
He's an amazing guy.
You're going to have a great time with him. If you want to register for his class, be sure to go to foiequip.org. Steve, Revelation chapter 20. We are getting so close.
We are getting in a good place, and we're not playing that song, Happy Days Are Here Again, but they are. I think Adam and Eve would be saying after
Do you want to sing it now? I mean,
No. But I was trying to think, because think about it, Chris. Genesis chapter 3, the earth is now, because of what Adam and Eve did, the earth is moaning.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had, about a week ago, we had smoke from Canada here. In New York, looked like an orange blaze. There's all kinds of stuff that happens to planet Earth that's happened to us because of sin, and God made certain promises.
Do you know, in light of our teaching on the end times, last days, eschatology, whatever you want to call it, I was listening to the news about the Canadian fires that came down here, and it was bad. I mean, it was bad. And so the sun was darkened.
It was orange. It was orange.
It was like the apocalypse.
It was.
And so I was watching the news at night, and apparently it had happened before in the 1700s when there was no TV, when there was no internet, when there was, everybody stayed in their communities for the most part. And all of a sudden that smoke from Canada comes down, and the people living down here thought it's the last days. It's the end times that are going on right now because the sun is blotted out and and so anyway.
Can you imagine being a pastor then? It's Sunday and you say, repent now. Look, the sign is visible.
That's right. And then all of a sudden sky's clear and the guy goes, I don't know what's going on. So go ahead. Sorry
all right. So we're coming to chapter 20. And by the way, again, last week we talked about mishmash and all the different views that there are there from a Christian point of view of eschatology. And in this chapter, Chris, 6 times 1,000 years is said 6 times. Mm-hmm. And there's some Christians say, yeah, don't pay any attention to that. Like from The Wizard of Oz, when at the end of the movie, when the wizard tells Dorothy, don't pay attention to the guy on the side there.
Yeah.
Look at the guy in the front. don't disregard everything you're saying.
They pull the curtain back.
That's right. They pull the curtain back. Well, look, it says 1,000 years. And it's important, I think, that we say that from the beginning when we started this book, the revelation of Jesus Christ, unless the context tells us something different, we regard Jesus as literal. Mm-hmm. We regard the 144,000 as literal. Mm-hmm. We regard the announcements of judgments by angels, real angels, as literal. All these things we regard because it simply says so, and there's nothing in the context to tell us any different. So when we come to this chapter, we're going to take what the words say in their natural meaning, unless there's some reason not to.
Can I ask a question, though?
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here. Okay. In 2 Peter 3, we talk about this. It says, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. How do you reconcile that with us saying, oh, no, here it's speaking of a actual 1,000 years, literally, and then there it's not? How would you answer a question?
I would say that the writer, John, it's possible that there could be some thinking that way, but he emphasizes, look what it says. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having a key to the bottomless pit, which I believe is literal. Mm-hmm. I believe there's a bottomless pit that's going to be used for Satan. And a chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil, Satan, bound him for 1,000 years. The context there, it's not for a day. He's not binding him for a day. Mm-hmm. He's binding him for a specific time period. But goes on. And cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished.
Yeah.
So
it's not like he's going, but 1,000 years could be a day, and a day could be. It's not. He's not giving the.
I agree with Peter that time to God means nothing.
Right.
So I always joke in a good sense. I hope. Hey, he's been gone a couple days. We think it's a long time, 2,000 years. Oh, he's been gone a couple days. To God, 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is 1,000 years. But in the context here, he's putting Satan. He's locking him up for a specific period of time.
And he's letting us know the beginning of it and the end of it as well.
Exactly. And so, but after these things, he must be released for a little while. Mm-hmm. So the whole context here is chronology, because there's going to be things that happen during this 1,000 years. In fact, there's prophetic writings that tell us that there's going to be people who die during this period. But if they die at 100 years old, according to Isaiah 65, 100 years old, my mother is 99. And I'm telling you, in our culture, 99, we say, that's amazing.
A blessing.
That's amazing. How is that possible? And Isaiah's talking about somebody dies at 100. What did he do wrong?
Yeah.
He must have done he's judged by the king, the king, priest, savior, Jesus Christ, who is absolutely just. And unless you're obedient, boom, he rules with a rod of iron. And so this is important, but it's a blessing. This is the good. This is the life that is going to come out of that 70th week of Daniel, that time of Jacob's trouble. It's a total reversal of the curse. And there's going to be blessing because God promised to one people, only one ethnic, literal nation was chosen, Israel. Only one. And so this promise is going to them and the whole world. I'll bless them that bless thee, and the whole rest of the world and all the nations will be blessed because of God's blessing to Israel.
It's interesting, too, that it says that Satan is bound so that he doesn't deceive the nations. You know, that's the specific term, goyim, to talk about the nation, not just Israel, but also the nations as a whole. And so you're right, is that Satan's been attempting to deceive the nations. God binds him, puts him in the abyss for 1,000 years for this moment in Judaism that's called the Messianic age. We call it the millennium, but this is the Messianic age because we believe Jesus is the Jewish Messiah who will return and sit on his throne in Jerusalem and bring the justice, righteousness, and peace that the Old Testament prophets had talked about.
It's what a day this is going to be, and what a time period this will be. Isn't it interesting that with Satan bound, there's no Satan made me do it. Back in my day, there was a comedian who used to say, the devil made me do this. The devil made me do this. Flip Wilson was his name. Well, there is no Satan to bother us. But what happens, Chris? What's going to happen during this period? Oh, it's great blessing, but stuff's going to happen, especially at the end. We're going to see the human heart on its own. The natural fallen man's human heart is sinful.
It's almost like the Garden of Eden, but for 1,000 years almost. You get this rule of Christ for 1,000 years, and then Satan gets to come out for one last hurrah to deceive the nations, just as he deceived Adam and Eve, and that's when things again
and
go
men
right,
and
go
women
right.
are going to follow him.
Yep.
Even with the king. The King of Kings is seated on the throne. People are living longer. Disease is gone. Affluence for everyone. Bounty for everyone. No more hungry. Nothing. And it's not going to be good enough.
And, you know, it's almost like it sounds almost like a political campaign, you know? Oh, come over here. Things are better on this side. Oh, look what he's done to you. Look at how he's treated you here, or what I'll do it better for you. I can help you. That's not what he said. He didn't say he would give you life so it sounds again, you know, like the Garden of Eden where Satan comes in and deceives Adam and Eve and leads them astray.
Yep, that's true. Well, verse 4 says, and I saw thrones and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. And I saw the souls of those who have been beheaded for their witness to Jesus. These are people in the tribulation who have been martyred in Jesus' name. And for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Chris, not a day.
Yeah.
No, not a day. They're going to reign for 1,000 years. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And I also want to highlight, too, that this is something that's been building in the book of Revelation, because there have been moments throughout as we've been reading it. If you remember, those who had been martyred and suffered for their faith were under the altar crying out to God, how much longer till you essentially vindicate the blood that we shed in your name? You know, they were waiting for justice. They wanted justice, divine justice. And this is the moment. What we see here at the end is finally they're no longer under the altar. Now they're standing next to Christ, and they see them. And as you had said here, I saw all the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast nor the image, and had not received the mark on their forehead or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So they were resurrected, they returned, and they were with Christ, standing vindicated to God's faithfulness. That's what it's all about. God will remain faithful to those who persevere. That's the idea as well. The perseverance, the endurance, the victory is waiting in the end, and Jesus is the one who makes it possible.
Chris, this is exciting. And in fact, I don't know if we want to transition. I think transition to the song.
Yeah.
Because so what happened is I was thinking of trying to find a song, and I thought of Happy Days Are Here Again, and your face was, I never heard that song. And
I was happy to play it, but I mean, it sounded like we were...
Yeah, it didn't do anything. So I looked up another song, and Chris, tell them a little bit about, we don't know this group. Up until about an hour ago, we never heard of them. And because we just want to make sure we share a small snippet of it, and in the show notes, you'll give them opportunity if they want to hear them. But we found that this group, which is certainly not normally my style of music, but the words are pretty amazing.
They're amazing. This is a rap group called Hazakim. It's two brothers that are actually Jewish believers out of Columbus, Ohio. And so they wrote a song called Millennium, and Steve found it, and we thought, you know what? It's almost too good. No, it's too good to pass up because the lyrics highlight perfectly exactly what we've been talking about. And ultimately, the whole story of the book of Revelation and how the millennium not only sums up the entire book of Revelation, but how it sums up God's entire redemptive plan going back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3 as well. So
listen to the words. Look, it's not my style normally. But I was gravitating, as we were listening, I never heard of this group, as they were, they enunciate their words so you understand. Yeah. I have old ears. I have to talk, when people talk to me, they talk so fast. What did you say? I understand what they were saying, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And that's why we're going to play Hazakim. The album's name is Origins, and the song name is Millennium. Enjoy.
Logic and reason. Yet every day and in every way, we long for much more than the present day. Free from the smoke, smell of decay, and the pepper spray to breathe the cool, cool breeze of the seventh day. Yeah. Creation and creator were in harmony. Peace manifested, everything rested in God's sovereignty. But here's the mystery. Possibly the sixth day and the Sabbath day is history plus prophecy. A day to the Lord's a millennium, key to discerning the times more than an idiom. In these last days that we're living in, we look toward the millennium. Yeah, let me take you to
we look toward the millennium.
Swim away from the shallow.
That's right, God's promises fulfilled.
That was hallowed. The ancient rabbis and church fathers say was a shadow, a blueprint of history and the way it unravels. Explain. It says a day into the Lord is 1,000 years. The key of time now appeared loud and clear. For every day of creation, it would mean a corresponding 1,000 years of history. For 6 days, God made the heaven and earth. 6,000 years, man is treading the dirt to gain, spread, and disperse and attain.
Very rabbinical.
Very rabbinical.
And hurt, death, and a curse. Yeah. Seventh day, God finished his work and rested. Yeah. 7,000 year peace on earth perfected. Okay. When the righteous king will return to bless and rule the Sabbath, when the saints of the earth possess it. Woo. Yeah, that's the millennial reign. He'll console and control. No video game. I know what many will claim, but this theory goes back to the disciples of John. It's not a trivial thing.
All right, everybody, you can listen to the Hazakim on YouTube. Just look them up.
We just wanted to share it on the notes and just play a segment of it. But look,
I like that he said in the millennium there'll be no more video games. I'm so tired of trying to get my kids off of video games and taking the iPads and the Switches and all this stuff. It'll be a glorious day. If he's right, there'll be no more video games.
That's right. That's right. We just found this to be interesting. We're neither endorsing that we're not endorsing them. We say this song is interesting and definitely talks about the millennium.
100%. I just want to read one more section before we end here in Revelation 20. It's the judgment of Satan. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle. In a number, they are like the sand on the seashore. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet have been thrown, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And so, again, the reason I bring that up, because it's going to play into our Yiddish word of the day later on, but I wanted to make sure you hear how this occurs once and for all where Satan is thrown into the lake of fire, and along with the beast and the false prophet, and to be tormented for day and night, forever and ever. You know, I remember the passage, the passage, Steve, in the Gospels, where the demons, they know who Jesus is, and they're frightened almost at the idea of being sent to the abyss. This is the same abyss that we see Satan being thrown into, because it's the origins of where Satan's coming from. God is sending him back down there and locking it for good and ending it once and for all. And that's when we see a turn away from the millennial kingdom, and we're going to begin to see a turn into the eternal state.
That's amazing. It's just amazing. God's going to fulfill his promises to Israel, and then a whole new chapter is going to happen. The eternal state, the new Jerusalem, a new heaven, and a new earth. What a day.
It will be great. But before we get there, we've got some news to talk about.
We do. Well, a new heaven and a new earth. I don't know if we'll be eating, but an Israeli startup boosts cultivated meat. Cultivated meat with 3D printing.
Yeah, what in the world? I saw a picture of it because it's the deep tech startup Stakeholder Foods used a selection of curated stem cells in its bio ink. To offer a range of cultivated meat products.
It developed unique software that allows for more complex and accurate 3D printing, which means that almost any kind of meat can be printed with extreme precision.
I saw a picture of it, and it looks like a T-bone.
Is that right?
I'll tell you something. Soon enough, you're going to come home, and you'll say, Alice, is dinner almost printed?
Chris, at the bottom, Stakeholder Foods was founded in 2019 and based in Rehovot.
That's right.
Rehovot?
That's right.
We know people who live in Rehovot.
That's right, because our Origins and Hesed teams go to Rehovot to do volunteer work at Kaplan Medical Center. So for all of our friends...
you're going to go to the hospital and they're going to give you 3D printed meat.
That's right. That we do serve in the kitchen at the hospital. So maybe one day we'll be waiting for the printed meat to come out or whatever.
My printer is out. No food.
That's right. That's when our volunteers step in and refill the ink. Okay.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, Chris, you got a news item that as I read it, this is so amazing. This actually involves archaeology. It involves DNA, getting DNA of things that lived a long time ago, and they scraped the DNA. Tell us, what is this?
This comes from Israel 365 News, and again, a big shout out to our listener, Alan Holtby, who sent us this. That's how I got it. I actually, when I go to set up the podcast, I'll go, I got to go. I'll just look up Alan's name to look for news, and boom. So, Alan, thank you again. But he sent this article, Biblical Era Yeast Lets Home Brewers Make Biblical Beer.
I didn't even know there was biblical beer.
Biblical beer. Beer has been around for a long time. I know that they have found, in Egypt, they have found the breweries or however they're brewing beer. So it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. But what's different this time, Steve, is that archaeologists have found Philistine yeast that was discovered at Tel Safi excavation that some believe was the ancient Philistine city of Gat that dates back to 900 BC. And pretty soon, the archaeologists, or I guess scientists, have taken this yeast that they found at Tel Safi and they've duplicated it. And now they're selling it to people who make beer at home. So now you can make biblical beer.
In 2019, researchers succeeded in isolating 6 strains of yeast taken from nanopores. I don't even know what a nanopore is.
I don't even.
Found on 21 potsherds excavated from 4 different sites in Israel that had once held beer or wine.
It sounds like they had the taps or whatever. 6. Oh, we got, what flavor do you want? We got 6 different whatever.
Let's go get some nanopores. Anyway, I don't drink myself, but I found this article absolutely amazing that they're reintroducing a beer type that was during the ancient Israelites.
This whole archaeology is just It blows my mind because I guess the image is that you just go down there, you dig around, you find things, blah, blah, blah. But they're doing so much more. Like here, that they duplicated the yeast from thousands of years ago so that you can taste what beer was like thousands of years ago. They did the same thing with the Judean date palm seed that they found many, many years ago. All of the date palms were torn down, I believe, by the Romans. And so Israel didn't have any original date palms. And so they imported them from Iraq. So the date palms that you see, if you ever travel to Israel with us, are Iraqi date palms. Until archaeologists found a date palm seed, they find a lot of them in the Masada excavations. And they took that, scientists took that date palm and they brought it back to life. It was a 2,000-year-old date palm seed from Herod's Masada. And they brought it back to life. It's the first Judean date palm in 2,000 years. That's mind-blowing. And then they also found excrement from a human, I believe, and they were able to go in there and find out.
Be careful here, Chris. Too much information.
Well, that's right. They found out he had IBS. No, I'm kidding. No, they found out what he was eating and the types of bacteria that were in the gut and things. I'm going, what in the world? So it's beyond just simply going, oh, here's a pottery shard, here's a coin, here's this ancient civilization. It's going down even to what they were eating, what kind of things were in their gut, what kind of beer they were drinking, all of it. It's amazing.
You could go to a restaurant in Israel in the future and say, I'll have that 3D patterned steak along with the ancient beer to wash it down.
That's right. Oh, and I'd like to follow that with some Judean date palms, please. Thank you.
There you go.
So anyway, that is all something interesting. If you want to drink something from Israel, that's biblical beer. If you want to eat something, that's going to be the cultivated meat with a 3D printer. Steve, but you've got some more serious news to talk about.
This is kind of sad, discouraging. Those are of our friends in Canada. We have Friends of Israel in our department, Chris, North American Ministries. Canada's part of that. Rob Gottslig is the director of Canada, and our Canadian reps know the uphill battle they've been facing during the administration in Canada that's going on now. And this is even more discouraging news, at least to me. The headline is from Israel 365. This is from Jerusalem.
This is Jerusalem Post.
Jerusalem Post, sorry. Jerusalem Post. Jewish anti-Israel conference sparks controversy in Canada. There's a group called Jewish Voices. That sounds good, but all the speakers that they brought are anti-Israel speakers. And they promote BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. They have controversial speakers.
Omar Bugatti,
who is the co-founder of the BDS movement. This group was founded in 2008. Emerged with the support of the United Church of Canada, which provided financial backing for the conference that led to its establishment. The organization collaborates with Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP, its American counterpart, which challenged the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. This whole thing, Chris, is just an anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism. It's anti-Israel. It's anti-Semitism. And it's being promoted, and it's just a sad day.
But for our listeners, help me. This is a Jewish organization.
It is a Jewish organization
that's promoting an anti-Israel sentiment. It's the Independent Jewish Voices, and I've seen this before in person. Many, many years ago, when I was living in Dallas, I flew up here for a Sabeel conference.
I remember you wrote about that in the magazine.
Yeah, in
Israel My Glory.
100%. And when I was here. And Sabeel is a Palestinian liberation theology proponent that's headed by, at least I think he still could be doing it, but his name is Naim Atik. And he's a pastor from the Palestinian territories, I think from Bethlehem. And he was promoting Palestinian liberation theology. And the theology is that the Palestinian people don't want to read the Old Testament because it has to do, it's so Zionist. it believes so much that the Jewish people will return to the land. They don't want to read it. So we have to alter the way that the Old Testament reads. And so we want to read the liberation stories of the Exodus account and things of that nature. We want to read those liberation stories in light of the Palestinians being liberated from the Zionists of Israel. It's all very interesting. But when I was there, I noticed there were some speakers that were, it's a very anti-Israel conference, but that there were some speakers that were Jewish themselves that were coming from organizations like this that were speaking down to Israel, calling it an apartheid state and things of that nature. And that's why this is interesting, Steve. I'm interested to know, as a Jewish person, what does it feel like to hear that Jewish people are running anti-Israel conferences?
Look, we've already talked about the fact that our people, you get two of us together, you get three opinions. I joke about that all the time. Look, in Israel itself, when they built the Knesset, when they designed it, they set a whole section just for people who protest, who disagree. There's stuff going on in Israel. It is a democracy. They allow for other views. And in fact, in the Knesset, there are Arab reps who denounce Israel. And so, yes, there are Jewish people, just like there are Jewish people who deny the existence of God. And that's, hey, the Bible's the only way we know the Jewish people are God's chosen people. And they're saying, no, not true. We're not chosen. None of that's true. So, look, I would defend their right to be that way if that's what they're saying. But if you look at Jewish history, the kinds of things that they're spewing are things that anti-Semites, anti-Jewish people, anti-Israel, deniers of the Holocaust. Look, there's a, it says IJV is expected to adopt resolutions during its annual general meeting, including one that resembles the revoked 1975 UN resolution equating Zionism with racism.
Yep.
So it's not good. They have the right to do it. I strongly disagree with them, and the scriptures disagree with them.
It's just I think of two things. Number one, the idea of equating Zionism with racism and adopting that that kind of resolution. You know, they're so pro-Palestinian, and we should care and support, have love for the Palestinian people.
God loves the world.
100%. And at the same time, though, their policies are more racist than Israel. Israel is a democracy. You can go there and shake the hand of an Arab Muslim, an Arab Christian, a Druze, a Jewish person. They're all Israeli citizens. They all have voice from the Knesset. Okay? But then when you go to the Palestinian territories, I've heard it before. They ask the question, if you ever get a Palestinian state, will Jewish people be allowed in your Palestinian state? I don't know.
No.
I don't know. I don't think so. And so that's called racism. That's racism. And yet they endorse these things. The other side of the coin, too, is thinking about the fact of someone like a Theodore Herzl, who is right behind me right now. He was somebody that believed, Jewish people just need to stop being Jewish. If they just assimilate, then guess what? They won't be different, or then they won't be different, and then they won't have anti-Semitism. There won't be hatred. But he quickly learned something, that the culture around him, the world around him was attacking Jewish people. Where will these Jewish people go when the very people that they're holding signs up with to get rid of Israel turn on them and say, hey, we're coming for you next. That always happens. Anti-Zionism meetings always blend into anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jewish people.
Always.
And so where are they going to go? They're going to have to, of course, they're going to have to fly to the very place they hate, Israel, because it's the only Jewish state in the world that will accept them like that. So it's interesting to see these things, and it's troubling, especially the resolutions that they're adopting, but something that we need to keep an eye on, and we'll keep talking about.
Absolutely.
All right, Steve. So, Yiddish word of the day.
Well, normally you turn it over to me, but you found the Yiddish word for the day, so I'm going to ask you to tell us what it is.
Well, I'll just say I found this Yiddish word of the day, and I want to thank the one and only Alice Herzig, because she has turned me on to a Facebook page that maybe our listeners who are on Facebook might want to go check out. and it's like a Yiddish word of the day. It's like the joys of Yiddish or something like that. And so all throughout the day,
people could write in. They put comments below.
100%. And so
they're hilarious.
Oh, that's somebody will just throw out a Yiddish word and they'll say, what does it mean? And then boom, there's hundreds of responses. And that's where I got this one. The Yiddish word of the day is Shtick-knar, Steve. Shtick-knar. I got to be careful because I feel like something might slip out that might get me in trouble.
That's right.
We'll need a bleep button.
Shtick-knar.
Shtick-knar, which literally means piece of a fool.
Well, who are we alluding to in Revelation chapter 20, Chris?
Well, we're alluding to that fool who comes back out of the abyss to deceive people. The Shtick-knar, Satan himself. He's a piece of a fool. And yet, once again, God will show his sovereignty over his creation. But Shtick-knar literally means piece of a fool, but means someone who's very foolish. The Yiddish word of the day, Steve.
What a word.
What a word. Shtick-knar. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being with us on the Jew and Gentile podcast. It's a joy. It's a joy to be with you.
Chris, this was, we had a lot of different things going on.
We're mishmashing this thing all over the place. Mishmash, right? Mishmash.
That's right.
Well, listen, don't mishmash for too long. Get ordered and get yourself to FOIEquip.org, and there you can register for Tim Harrison's upcoming class this July on church history. You'll want to be there. It'll be a great time. Also, text us 424-444-1948.
Hey, tell us about the mugs.
Hey,
are you in or out?
Are you in or out on the mug on the mug? Come on.
A mug on a mug.
424-444-1948. Hey, we'll see you next week.